Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session of the Church Online Communications Comprehensive. I am Peter Frank, and I'll be leading the session today, just like I have for the last 8 weeks. So today we are live on location in Barrington, Illinois. I'm at St. Matthew Lutheran Church. This is my home congregation. I haven't been here in about 10 years as an active member since I moved to St. Louis, but it's really fun to be back here. We're in the church library. You can see the books behind me. So this church holds a special meaning in my heart just from my faith development as a young kid. We joined the church when I was in 3rd grade, and I was actively involved all the way through high school and even into college some, even when I moved out of state. So it's great to be back here. We're going to be talking about church websites today. And it's especially important for me to be here to talk about church websites because I helped launch our first website back in 2001. And it's a very different time in online communications now than it was then. But some things haven't changed, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, let me transition over to my contact information just so that you can have that and be ready to go. If you've joined this multiple times in the past, you've probably seen that already, but you can reach out to me. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager of Church Supplies at Concordia Publishing House. My email address is there, and I love to speak with people who are actively involved in the church, who are in communications and using the tools that we talk about in this course to further share the gospel. So please be sure to reach out to me whenever you can. So the topic for today, building a great website for church communications. We're going to answer the question, how can our website help us communicate? And that's a very broad topic. And we could spend several weeks on this. We're going to spend weeks talking about it in a few different lights. This week we're going to go a little bit different in that we're talking some timeless truths and timely trends. And we'll talk about some things that are still true today that were true 17 years ago when we first started building St. Matthew's website. We'll look at what has changed. Quite a bit has changed since then. So we want to make sure that these are high-level strategic planning things that you can do. We're switching gears from talking communication strategy to now getting tactical, and we'll be getting into social and emails and blogs over the next few weeks. But as we talk about church websites, it's too broad to cover everything. We're not going to get into the code, but we'll get into some key best practices. All right, so let me transition back here. So the outline for today, we're going to talk about my first church website. I'll show you an example, or show you the homepage and how that's changed, timeless truths and timely trends. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, there it is. I even found an old monitor to put it on. St. Matthew Lutheran Church. stmatthewbarrington.org was our official domain name back then. It's still true today. And we'll be talking about this some more near the end. I'll give you a preview of what's up next. But you can see there that it's a pretty basic church website. And back then, that was all that was needed. Very simplistic design. We had some great line art, a picture of the church that one of the members did many years ago. And the navigation on the right-hand side. And that was actually unusual back then, right-hand navigation. Left-hand navigation was a little bit more common. But we wanted to be clean and precise about what the church was about. So there you go. I found that in our Wayback Machine. If you go there, you can view plenty of old websites. So let me switch back here. I'm on my laptop today, so you'll notice there's going to be a lot of back and forth. And by the way, as you're here, if you've got any comments, go ahead and put them in the chat. I think I'll be able to get that. I've had some problems in the past with that, but I think we should be okay today. So I'm happy to answer any questions as we go. Okay, so back then in 2000, in the year 2000, I was a 15-year-old kid, member of the youth group, and I was doing some web design just as a project, a side hobby. I had learned how to code a little bit of HTML. CSS wasn't really a thing back then, and so I didn't learn that, but I really enjoyed it. I made baseball sites for my favorite baseball players' favorite teams. And as we talked about the church getting a website, kind of getting into the new century, our pastor asked me to be involved, and me and one of the other youth, Stephen Marks, was also on there. He's a little older than me. He'd been doing websites quite a bit longer, like 2 years at that point, which in the internet at that time was very long. And they asked us to temporarily join the board of PR communications. And that was a great experience for me because while I had learned some of the coding and some of the best practices, I got to understand communication and what that meant. And, no longer was I just doing baseball things. It was actually serving a purpose, sharing the gospel through this newfangled internet. So that was a lot of fun, and a lot of what I learned in that process, I put in place still today as I market products at CPH, as I help churches with their websites today. And that's really where we're going next. So let me switch back here. So, best practices for church website design. The first thing we're going to talk about, timeless truths. These are things that are as valid today as they were 16 years ago when we launched the site in 2001. So, timeless truth, number 1. Focus on your audience. We've talked about that quite a bit in this course. That's where we spent the first few weeks. And as we discussed, this is true in any form of communication. If you are focused only on what you want to communicate and not focused on your audience, you're going to miss the mark. And that is so true in church websites, in that we have many different audiences. We have our members and keeping them engaged in the activities of the church. But more importantly, we have our community, those that we are wanting to reach with the gospel message, that we're wanting to invite them into our church home to be an active member of our congregation. That requires very different messaging. And so as you look at your church website, whether it was 16 years ago using basic HTML, or today when you have all of these different options for systems and design and devices, the audience is still number 1. That's who you're speaking with. And if you don't think about that, then you're going to miss the mark in terms of having the message reach them. So that is timeless truth number 1. All right, timeless truth number 2. Keep your navigation simple. So we're going from theoretical, high-level idea in terms of communication to real practical. Navigation is the first thing that you should be thinking about on your website, because what you think in terms of navigation, where you're leading your people, will also help dictate what is necessary on your homepage and how you leverage your homepage compared to the sub-pages underneath that. So put there the note, the path to information on your website should be clear, easy to follow, and supportive of your church goals. Now, we talked a lot about church goals at the beginning of this course and how church goals lead to communication goals, but ultimately church goals become the destination on your journey map for the members of your congregation, for your audiences. Where are you hoping to lead them? What actions are you hoping to have them take to reach those goals? Your navigation is that pathway to those actions. And whether it's a submission form, or they're downloading something, or they're signing up for an event, your navigation leads them to that path. Now, homepages used to be the key. Everything revolved around homepage. But as homepages have shrunk down to this size, there's only so much that you can fit on it. And so that's where navigation, having a simple navigation that's easy to find. On a mobile device, you can't put all of the words readily available, so you have to have something that appears, whether a drop down or a slide in. And so making your navigation visible, making sure that people know where to click to get it, and then structuring your navigation in a way that prioritizes the most important messages. So if your church is actively involved in community service, having that up at the top. If Bible study is the key thing, and you have a large portion of your ministry efforts revolving around studying God's Word, then that should be at the top. If inviting people to worship is how you get them into the door the first time, then of course that should be at the top. But it should, again, go back to the audience. What's in it for them? So making it clear and concise that it's I'm new here, or for the potential visitor to click and find out about the church. If you focus your attention on you at the church and you have lots of information about us, contact us, history, that's focusing the audience back to you, and that's not your goal. So navigation is the best way to support those goals of drawing people into your ministry, into what's unique about your congregation. Okay, so let's move on to timeless truth number 3. Build it strategically. A website without a plan is better than no website, or is barely better than no website at all. Is the note I put on there. And we've talked a lot about strategy. Strategy meaning thinking through it from beginning to end, using your church goals at the end. The journey map is that key strategy, the content map that we put together a couple weeks ago as well. As you plan all of that information out, building the website and building the content, putting that in, becomes secondary and much easier because you know exactly where you're going. And then you're just filling it up with the appropriate content. So if you are just going to have a website. And I've heard this many times. We've done several focus groups with fourth-year seminarians, people who are about to become pastors in the congregation. And I was so disappointed when somebody says, our website just needs to have our address and our service times. That's it. We don't need anything more on that. And that's so short-sighted, and that your website can be a great tool for reaching your audience. And so if the strategy is just to have that, then you might as well just buy billboards because it's just putting that information there. So, but building your website strategically, looking at the whole picture from beginning to end of that audience journey will allow you to figure out exactly what you need along the lines. And those steps can be steps for your navigation, but they're also going to be communicating what you put on the imagery, what your call to actions are, what's the first thing somebody sees on your site when you click them to lead them further in. So that is still a little bit more high level, but building your website strategically, that has not changed from the time. And actually, let me switch back here. The fun thing when I was thinking about that process of building our website, I remember the binders that we had. Our pastor was very big on binders and paperwork. And I remember we had a binder with every single page that we wanted to put on our website. And we each put our notes in there and we'd lay it on the table and we'd have this idea of where things were going. And it seemed silly at the time because I was already fully immersed in computers, but it was really helping think through that process strategically. So I still remember the Pastor Shock binders. I had plenty of other Pastor Shock binders too from other events. You hear some laughter in the background. These are my guests that will be joining me a little while. They know Pastor Shock very well. Okay, so next, number 4. Prefer images over text. And this is a timeless truth, but it's probably even more important today than before. And we'll talk about where images do pose some problems. But having visual images on there, I guess that's kind of redundant, but having images on there is key to draw people in, add color to your site, and create some action or activity. If you have a website that's full of text, it becomes more research-based, and you rely on people to read it. I think of a site like Wikipedia, and there's plenty of images on there, but the text is the primary focus. It puts your visitor in that almost research mode, and that's not often the mode they're in when they're looking at available churches. That's certainly not the mode your members are in when they're coming to your website. They're looking for the most up-to-date current information. So images help draw people in. Putting people in images makes it feel more relational. And sometimes people just want to come to see which people are in your images, which is why your images should not be stock photos. They should be photographs of your congregation, of activities that are going on, events. There's some things that you have to be careful with in terms of permissions, and we've got some blog posts about that'll help you. But putting images instead of text will draw people in, and having too much text will push people away. It becomes exhausting if you have to read that. Like I showed before in the picture of our church website, we had very little text on that home page. We had the line art drawing, which probably isn't ideal for a website, but it worked at the time. And then our navigation was very much image focused too, showing handbells and mission trips and that. And so that hasn't changed. How you go about implementing it may have changed a little bit, and that's a skill set that is very important today when it comes to web design. Timeless truth number 5. Prefer timeliness over design. An ugly-looking website with current information is always better than a pretty website with old news. And I can speak from personal experience. This doesn't go back to this church. When we were visiting my family in a different state and looking for a church to visit, we pulled it up on our phones, and we found out service times are at 9:30. And we went to the church right at 9:30, and there was no cars in the parking lot. And that's because it was summer hours and their service times had changed and they hadn't updated their website. And it was a very nice looking website, but it didn't help me out any because the service wasn't going on. And so that is often the case with church websites. And you've probably heard me use the phrase, making your church website more than an online bulletin board. Most bulletin boards that I visit and churches that I visit, I see often have out-of-date information. It's very static content. And if you treat your website in that same way, you're not focused on your audience. Your audience is coming to the website to get the latest and greatest, the news that they're hoping to read and see what's coming up next. If you are just putting up the information that is going to stay there long term, it goes back to that strategy or lack of strategy of just putting up your address and your service times, and that doesn't serve your audience well at all. And if you have the service times wrong, it's even worse. So timeless truth number 5, prefer timeliness over design. All right, the last one here. Timeless truth number 6, remember the low barrier to entry. And this may be debatable, but I think it's still true. And at least in my experience, coming as a young teenage kid who basically was able to learn HTML on my own, it doesn't take much to get a website up. It doesn't take much to maintain it. It does take time to get a good website up, and it does take time to to maintain a good website. But the barrier to entry has always been very low. A website is inexpensive when you compare it to the price of advertising in Yellow Pages. Websites are cheaper than that, and there's many free options. The more tools that you have, the more expensive it may get. But the barrier to entry has always been very low, and getting a domain name, that custom URL to go to your church, that's only a few dollars a year. You can buy it through us for $30 a year, and we'll maintain all the side or the technology side of it for you. You can get it cheaper if you're going to do that too. So it's really a low barrier entry to get a website up, to get it moving. And that hasn't changed. The tools have certainly changed. There's far more available. When we built our first website here at St. Matthew, I was a little annoyed because Stephen wanted to go with Microsoft Front Page, which I felt was kind of like cheating because I had done the work to learn HTML. And the sites I made, I did all the coding myself, and it was kind of a badge of honor. And Microsoft Front Page kind of did it all for you. You laid it out, and it exported the HTML, and you upload it, and it was great. And I learned during that process that just because I knew HTML doesn't mean that everybody else knew or could maintain a site that way. And so most of the tools require very little knowledge of code, if any knowledge at all. And with other tools out there from a design standpoint, really it's just about getting the information and the strategy right. So that has not changed. Timeless truth number 6, remember the low barrier to entry. Let's move on into best practices for church website design, but timely trends. So what has changed in the last 16, 17 years? And the things that have changed address the needs and technology of today. Obviously, technology has changed dramatically since then. Smartphones were several years off back in 2000, 2001. You never even thought about having a screen smaller than a monitor. And monitors were getting bigger at the time, not smaller. Resolutions were getting larger. And so you started the shift into bigger screens. And as technology has changed, certainly you need to go smaller screens. But then also think about how people use this. Information is now available within inches at all times. I don't have the specific numbers of the study, but the amount of time each day that somebody spends more than arm's reach from their phone is minutes, because people usually sleep with this next on their nightstand. They carry it in their pocket or their purse throughout the day. They're never away from this, which means they're never away from information about your church. And so where it used to be more of a destination, you'd go to your computer, maybe you dial up to the internet and connect. Now it's not seen as a big deal to quickly just go to a website and pull it up. As technology has changed, you don't even type in the URL. I use the Google Assistant so much now, and I just ask Google, okay, Google, tell me where this is. So those things have changed, which has caused, obviously, your church website and your strategy there to change. So timely trend number 1, optimize for search engines. The potential traffic for your website from search engines is far greater than any other acquisition source. Now, let me clarify that by what I mean by search engines, because that has also changed. Google was not a big company in 2001. Yahoo search was still number one. Google was coming on board. They certainly didn't control the market. Now Google has become the search engine and has since moved past that only to be also a platform. And so when you think search engine, it goes to things like Google Assistant, where the search is done by a verbal request. And it doesn't require you to really have that key URL that everybody needs to remember. It used to be that your URL was something that you posted on the sign outside your church. You'd put it in your bulletins, you'd put it on your business cards, and all of that's still good. You definitely should still do that, but that's not how people are getting to your site. They're getting to your site by going into Google, maybe Bing, probably not. They're going into Google and they're typing in churches near me. They're not even typing in the city. And Google, understanding location, geo-targeting, all that, will pull up the most relevant content. Now, that could lead you to think that you are building a website for search engines. And to a certain extent, you want to keep that in mind. We're going to have a whole session on search engine optimization coming up in 2 weeks. And we'll talk about what's needed for that. One of my associates, Erica, is going to join me. She is our copywriter and has a great understanding of how to write copy from a search engine SEO perspective. Search engine optimization is SEO. But as Google has changed and people try to manipulate their websites to work with the algorithms, Google is continually focusing on their audience. Their entire goal is that when you search for something, you get exactly what you're looking for. And so they've programmed their algorithms to be audience focused, going back to our timeless truth number one. So as Google is being audience focused, they reward those websites that are audience focused as well. So it really comes back to it. But the key here is that understanding how people get to your website will allow you to prioritize where you spend your time. Getting to your website directly and using something like Google Analytics to see your acquisition sources is going to be key. You can see these trends, though, and that way you know I'm not just saying it. It's true. Getting that acquisition to be from search engines will help you plan out your site. And that's where things like navigation come into play. Google's looking at your navigation to see exactly what you prioritize on your site, what relevant content that is. And so as you're doing activities in your church, whether it's a community event or a mission trip or a Bible study, Google's going to be providing your site back for search results related to that, not just churches near me. All right, I could talk about that all day, and we will talk about it for a while in 2 weeks, so please come back and join us for that. Number two, timely trend number two, make it mobile compatible. Now, this probably is a no-brainer, or at least it started to become a no-brainer 2 to 3 years ago, even more. But the shift has happened in the last year that now more people will visit your website on this than on your computer. And Google's seeing that within all web traffic. Now, church websites may be a little bit behind on that. If you look at the numbers, I would guess it's probably not too far. It depends on the age of your audience, of your congregation or your potential visitors. But it's going to be really close, if not 50-50. The tide has shifted and mobile is first. So what that means is your website has to load well on a mobile phone, and it has to load quickly. And so there was a time where websites would have an alternative mobile site. And that would be the key, that what you visited on when you were on your phone, the site that you returned on your URL was something entirely different than your church website. Well, that's hard to maintain. You're then maintaining two sites, and even if you have a content management system that provides that support, it's two different experiences. So what has changed is what's called responsive design, which means that your website responds to the device. And that way, whether you are on a mobile device like this or a tablet like this, where I'm keeping track of any chat messages, your website still looks good and similar, not exactly the same. Your navigation may disappear into a drop-down menu. Your images may shift from being on the side of the text to being on top of that. It's responding accordingly. And so website responsive design is the key. That has certainly changed. That's not going anywhere. As websites are continuing to evolve, you're seeing a mobile-first approach as opposed to even just a responsive approach where you design for your phone and then figure out the desktop later. So that's number 2 for timely trends. Number 3, contextualize for your audience. One size fits all has never been ideal. Now it's no longer necessary. And we've talked about that some as we've talked about personas and journey map and all of that. And I'm going to pull up an example from our website builder, Church 360 Unite, and what that means. So let me transition over to that. So what that means is when you log into a website, obviously as an administrator, you see something different. Here is the example. It should look familiar from a few weeks ago where you have the top bar. What we have built in this is the ability to put members-only pages. And so, like, let's see, announcements. Many announcements provide no relevance at all to your visitors. When they're announcements about voters meeting, as I think I used that example already in this course, you don't want to invite non-members to a voters meeting because for one, they can't vote, and for two, they're very rarely interesting or exciting or relevant to your audience. So those kind of things you may want to put on a members only site. And so what we've built in here is the ability to mark something as private. And you'll see all these little labels, members only. So what that means is then when you log out, we'll just go here and sign out, the visitors to your website are not going to see that even in your navigation because it's not relevant to them. So not only does this hide the information that's not relevant to them, it prioritizes the information that is relevant. And so as you focus on your audiences, your members are coming to your website for one reason, and you already have a relationship with them. You can give them the login credentials. We make it really easy to just mass send information out there. But that focuses your message on the audience and then allows you to use your website for things that are very confidential. It always worries me when I see like the Acolyte schedule posted on the church website. Now, St. Matthew's here does a great job. They just put the first name on there, not the last name of the kids. They'll do that for the adults. But I've seen some church websites where they'll put the full name. The worst that I saw that I even mentioned to them was a church that had put their confirmation class up there, full names, parents' names, and birth dates on there, and all publicly available. I could access it. Those are the things that should be completely behind password protection. Only members of the congregation should see that. And even then, you got to be careful with things like birth dates. But the tools are available for you to do this. You no longer have to have that one-size-fits-all. This website is what everybody is accessing. Now, some churches will try to get around this by having their website and then their Facebook page, and maybe a private Facebook group. And that's not a bad strategy, but it's two very different experiences. They're not going to the same place. And there is some information that you want for both audiences. You do want your Christmas services, for example, available to your members and your non-members, especially those members that may only come for Christmas. So there's some things that you want for both audiences. Having that all available on your website where everybody can see it is key. All right, so that is timely trend. Pardon me, I'm getting my T's confused. That's number 3. Next up, number 4, make your content shareable. You've put a lot of time in creating your content. Allowing others to share it has never been easier. And this extends the reach of your content. And I know that is often a deterrent for keeping your website up to date. If you find that you have a lot of activity on social media, on your Facebook page, and not as many people are coming to your website, you may be encouraged to do content on social media and not so much on your website. That does lead to the website becoming out of date, and then you have those problems that we talked about before where it's irrelevant information, and then people won't come to it. So if you use those two in tandem, that's what we talked about last week as we talked about content framework. If your content is being shared on your website or posted on your website and being shared on social media, you are using social media to draw people into your church website, into your home base, and that will allow you to engage them on your turf, prioritizing the content for each audience. It'll generally be people that you know. But it'll show your members, show your visitors, your audiences that your website is an active part of your communication strategy. And so there's lots of tools out there, many different plugins for how you can allow people to share it. It certainly means you should be sharing this information on your social media channels as you're posting information on your site. But it's never been easier than before, and that's certainly a different approach than what we had 16 years ago. Social media wasn't even around for Facebook hadn't launched until 2004, so that wasn't even on our radar at the time. All right, number 5, prioritize video. Consumption of video content is greater than ever before, and it's only growing. There's some numbers saying just the volume of videos has increased to that becoming the most content that's being consumed. Now, some of it's the size of it, and as you look at the different studies, you have to figure out, is it the number of different videos or just the volume of data being consumed on videos? But it's not going away. And I can't imagine 20 years ago thinking about having a TV this size in your pocket, but this is far more than TV. I mean, things like we're doing today, a live video. I was able to just pack up a laptop, a speaker, and a video and come and present live on site. This kind of media has never been available like it is today, and it's inexpensive, and it's good quality. I mean, we're not talking about a phone camera here. We've got HD quality video. All of this is readily accessible for not just churches, but for everybody, and everybody's using it. And when you look at YouTube and even Facebook has shifted everything to be far more focused on video than ever before. That content is being prioritized because it's more engaging. And so getting used to video and figuring out the best ways to use it in the church is going to be key. It already is key, but it's only going to be more key. Now, thinking back to 16 years ago, video on websites, that just didn't happen because of download speeds. Video has always been significantly larger in terms of file size, and as you transferred content, you'd have to sit and wait for not just seconds or minutes, but sometimes hours to download a large video set. So video wasn't a thing on websites, but now you can download an entire movie in a matter of minutes, depending on your download speed and where you're located. But that's just so different than it was before. So that is one area where churches, especially smaller churches, aren't even thinking about it right now and think that may be a mega church thing. But let me assure you, that is where all media consumption is today. Not just is going, but is today. And there's some really great ways of doing it. I had breakfast with a friend of mine who is a pastor, and he is using video very well in his ministry. He works with youth, and so he's on Instagram posting devotions, short 60-second devotions that is just him talking, and it's so engaging for his audience, the youth group. He's using Snapchat videos and other things, and it's not high production value because it doesn't have to be. Nobody is expecting you to have lights and all of that stuff. It's just being real and being relevant and timely because it's live. So video is key. If that's not a part of your strategy, I'd definitely consider it. And we have some resources available at CTS of using video, also photography in your ministry. So that's number 5. The last one we're going to talk about today is utilizing conversion actions. Your website is not just a billboard. Use it to move your audience further along your journey map and closer to your goals. This gets you out of that bulletin board mindset where you're posting something up there, people are consuming it and walking away. Use your website to draw people further to your goals. And so whether that is, coming to the website to download the materials for Bible study, or to sign up for that youth group activity, or to send your prayer request, or sign up for an event, all of those things are key, and your website is the best place for it. Now, there's plenty of tools out there for whatever your goals may be. If, like we talked several weeks ago, if one of your goals is to improve the building through a capital campaign, well, getting contributions on your website has never been easier before. We work with Vanco Payment Solutions, and they're fantastic, and they make these great tools to make it easy to contribute to the church. And that's thinking about things that are timely. Often when you're in the church, if you don't have your checkbook with you, which who carries a checkbook anymore, when you have that urge to give, you may not be able to do it at that time. The website can make it available, and so as you're doing this, maybe you're doing a video about something that needs some funds, you can quickly give people access to take that action. And that's just one example. There's many different examples that we've already talked about, all related to your goals. What are those actions you're wanting your members, your audience to take? Your website should be that place for it. You shouldn't be sending people elsewhere for it because it takes them farther away from your church, basically, your church's online presence. So in going back to this idea of comparing today with 16 years ago, that also wasn't a thing there. We couldn't allow people to take actions, certainly not with transactions. The security then wasn't what it is today, and churches could not afford those kind of services where there was security. And so we can do that thing, sign up for events. That required a lot more custom coding 16 years ago than it does today. So that is the last timely trend. I'm checking over questions. Don't have any questions right now. If you guys have any questions or comments, or if you think I missed something out or left something out, or if you disagree with any of those points, let me know. Let's just do a quick review of those. So the timeless truths: focus on your audience. That is true in any kind of communication, digital or otherwise. Keep your navigation simple. Build your website strategically. Have a plan going in and stick to that plan, adjust as necessary, but make sure that you're using all aspects of your website for your goals. Prefer images over text. Prefer timeliness over design. Having the relevant content up there in the most consumable manner, whether it's images or video like it's coming up, having those things is far better than the alternative, which is static, text-heavy content. Remember that it is a very low barrier to entry. Websites should not be scary. Having a good website does take time and effort, but not anywhere near what some of the other communication channels are. And so make sure you do your best to have that, because it's such an important part of your communication strategy. But don't let the importance of a website scare you away, because it's easy to get into it and to get going. So the timely trends that you have to keep an eye on, and we, I think I mentioned this before, these are timely trends there right now, but I think they're also going to stick. The things we talked about, some of them have been around for several years, like search engine optimization. These are things that I think will be here for a while until the next technology comes out. So, getting my screens confused. There we go. Optimize for search engines. Understand that search engines are no longer just a text field that you click search on to find out, but that it could be on your phone. With Alexa and just being available in your house, wherever you're standing, you can say, Alexa, tell me whatever, and it'll find it. My kids have too much fun with that. Thankfully, my daughter can't correctly pronounce Alexa, otherwise she might be buying stuff. But it's so easy to search and find information without ever going to a computer. Make it mobile compatible. When people are going to your website, they're most likely going on their phones. Contextualize for your audience. The things that not everybody needs to see, put behind the password, put behind the wall, and make sure that your members have access to that so that you can put relevant, sensitive information behind that. Make your content shareable. Share it yourself, but make it easy for your members to share it. Prioritize video in your communication strategy. That's only going to become more and more important and only going to become easier to do. And lastly, utilize conversion actions. Draw people into your goals. Give them the opportunity to take that next step. All right, if you'd like to learn more about this, and I only put 6 of these, 3 of each section on our blog, you can go to our blog today and read through that. You can share that content with others. But if you want to get a whole listing of them, you can go to the end of the blog post and get the free download, Timeless Truths and Timely Trends for your church website. And let me switch over that real quick so you can see that. I don't go into as great of detail as I did here today, but I've put this in just this easily printable thing. You could, if you want to put this on your bulletin board, you can go ahead and do that and just keep that fresh in mind. These things can be forgotten if you're not focusing on them regularly. So having a just nice reminder. We've done a lot of worksheets on these sessions. We're giving you guys a break this week that you don't have to actually do anything. You can just read this. So that is available free for download. And lastly, if you haven't joined our Facebook group, please go ahead and do that. We've got well over 400 people in there now. I've been posting a few things here and there. We've had other people post stuff. It's a good place for us to build our community, to grow and help each other grow as we're all working towards the same goal of sharing the gospel. All right, quick question. I just see on here Penny's asking about talking more about email. Penny, I'm not going to do that today because we're going to do that next week. That is actually the topic next week of creating a communication hub for your church. And it's tied in with your websites, but we're going to focus on emails and blogs and what that means as a core part of your communication. And I think sometimes those are not often thought of in the church as much as they are in like businesses. But they're a key part of any online online communication strategy, whether you're a church or not. And so we're going to talk about how to use those tools in the church next week. So that's what I'm not going to talk about this week, but I do appreciate the comment. And if anybody else has any questions, please let me know. So we'll switch back over here one last time. Next week, like I just mentioned, establishing a communication hub for your church. It'll be same time, 11:30. I'll be back in St. Louis for this one. I think it'll be a really good session. I'm excited to share this. I've learned a lot about both email and blogs over the last few years, and just the value of what they can do for any kind of communication strategy. I'll go ahead and put my I forgot I have the schedule. There's the last 5 sessions. I can't believe how far along we are. This is a 14-week course. We've only got 5 sessions left. So Communication Hub next week. I forgot. Search engine is actually 2 weeks from now, or 3 weeks from now. Social media is 2 weeks from now. And then the last 2 sessions, we're going to talk about how you can save time in doing this. We've thrown out all sorts of information here, and the question often comes up, well, when do I find the time to do it? We're going to give you some help for that. And then lastly, how do you roll out the communication strategy? So let me put my contact information up there one more time briefly in case you want to reach out to me. Email's probably the best way, but you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. But I do want to invite you, come back in a few minutes. We're going to be doing a live interview of sorts. We're going to talk about church communications and the role of lay people in that. Here with a couple of guests that'll join me here from St. Matthew. So I'm very excited for that. We're going to end this broadcast. We're going to get set up in the room, and we'll be talking probably, let's see, we're at 12:11 right now, probably in the next 15 minutes or so. So I hope you come back to join us. Thank you for joining me today. Let me put this right back up on the screen one last time. If you need to reach out to me, go right ahead. So with that, I'll say thank you and have a great rest of the day. Bye.